Hello guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Path of Exile Skills. Today we're going to be looking at a Path of Exile skill that most people probably just don't even look at. It's the regular schmegular spear throw. And you might be asking, well, what's special about the regular schmegular spear throw? Well, it's not just a spear throw. If we look at it, it says it's an AoE projectile repeatable. It also has hurl your spear with force, consuming a frenzy charge if you have one to cause the spear to explode at the end of its flight. If you look at the explosion damage, it says 838% damage with an explosion radius of 2 meters. So if we look at our spear is currently doing 21,288 damage per second, and we also have the explosion damage, right? So this is the explosion that's caused by the frenzy charge, and it has a damage of 42,927 per second. This explosion has a radius of 2.2 meters, and it consumes a frenzy charge to cause that explosion to happen. Let's take a look at how it looks in action, as opposed to just simply regularly throwing the spear. So if I just regularly throw the spear and I don't have a frenzy charge, then one thing that I can look at is I can just look and see how much damage I'm doing, right? So like, let's find a monster, and I'm just going to throw a spear at a target. And as you can see, I can do pretty decent single target damage. Not really the most amazing AoE, but I can at least do single target damage with the spear. Now, I could make the spear pierce, I could make the spear chain, I could make the spear like chain off terrain, and a bunch of other things. But we're going to talk about why that's not exactly a good idea if you're trying to get the explosion to do damage, right? So, one of the problems with all that stuff is that all that stuff is designed around essentially getting like additional effects, right? Well, the explosion happens, if you read it, it specifically states at the end of its flight, which means that if you pierce, it's not going to explode when it hits the target. It's going to hit the target. It's going to explode after you get that explosion, right? Or after you get that pierce. So it's going to pierce the target first, and then when it hits the end of its flight, it's going to explode there. So one thing that you actually don't want with this build is you don't want to be piercing the attacks, because if you pierce, you will almost always fail to get the explosion to go off inside the pack that you're trying to kill, right? Then you have to generate frenzy charges, which of course is not always the easiest thing. You can utilize, obviously, combat frenzy. Combat frenzy is a good choice. You can also utilize other methods to get frenzy charges. I believe I'm currently utilizing Spearfield and armor break by converting my endurance charges into frenzy charges, which allows me to essentially generate endurance charges using Spearfield, which also converts them into frenzy charges via the charge, I think it's charge perfusion or something, I can't remember the name of it. But let's take a look and see how the frenzy charges work. So I have 4 frenzy charges right now, so let's find a nice pack, and boom. As you can see, one arrow or one spear and the whole pack just disintegrates, because the explosion is actually really freaking good. Good enough that you can actually build an entire character around this particular ability if you wanted to. You just have to focus on getting the most out of that explosion, dishing out a massive amount of damage in return. You also have to have a concrete way, of course, of generating those frenzy charges so that you can utilize it. Now, another thing that could potentially be a problem is if you're utilizing frenzy charges for something else and you don't want to use frenzy charges for this skill, then you actually probably need to use the support gem, which actually removes the ability for the skill to consume frenzy charges. I can't remember the name of it right off the top of my bat, but I'm sure if you look in the support gems, you'll find one that actually stops the ability from consuming frenzy charges. Another thing is that you can use it with Mirage. And I think I might actually have that on Mirage. I don't. Okay. But in this particular case, I'm utilizing Mirage with this, so I can essentially get both effects, or have my cake and eat it too, so to speak. And let me go to town real quick and look for that support gem so that we can see exactly how this would work. So let's grab skill gems. Let's go down to our supporty boardies, and of course we got like no support gems on here. Tier 1, and that's it. Let's type in charge, and I'm trying to remember the name of the ability specifically. Why am I forgetting? Inhibitor. There it is. Inhibitor. Supported skills you use trigger yourself. Supported skills cannot consume charges or infusions by any means. Cannot support skills which require charges, infusions to be used. The supported skills deal 4% more damage per different type of charge or infusion on you. So basically, it allows you to apply the inhibitor to the ability. In this particular case, I would probably want Inhibitor on Mirage, as an example, because I don't want Mirage to consume all of my Frenzy charges for my main ability, which is also consuming Frenzy charges, if you get what I'm drift. And in the vice versa, if you were utilizing Spear Throw and you did not want Spear Throw to consume charges, again, you would use Inhibitor on Spear Throw to stop it from consuming charges in that particular way. It's a pretty interesting ability. It does a lot of high physical damage. You can, of course, change that into other damage types if you're utilizing a specific spear that has other types of damage, right? So if you want to increase or change the damage type, you can, of course, utilize a spear that is all cold, for example, or all fire, or all lightning, or even all chaos if you want to convert it, which basically makes Spear Throw into a very usatile, like multi-damage type explosion-based ability. I was actually kind of surprised at how well that it worked, but I also had to take a long time to figure out exactly how to get the most out of it. Because of the whole, like, spear only explodes at the end of its flight thing, I had to forego piercing. In fact, I needed to make sure that it was not piercing. And I had to look up, like, a chain of events of, like, what the spear can actually do. Like can it chain? Can it... can I get multiple spears? Can those multiple spears like do more damage? Like more projectiles isn't necessarily a bad thing with this ability because you get multiple projectiles also exploding. I ended up going with a single projectile because it was doing more damage, but you can definitely work on trying to get more projectiles with your spear. It's a little bit harder to get more projectiles with a spear than it is like with the bow, for instance. I would definitely not use the support though. I know there's a support. It's called like multi-shot or whatever. This one unfortunately reduces the damage way too much, 35%, which just decreases the overall damage just dramatically. So definitely not one that I would potentially use with this. But if you can get additional projectiles relatively cheap with this ability, then you can have multiple explosions, which of course is also very nice for the way that the ability functions. Being a basic skill, there is a bit of an issue. So because it's a basic skill, it's a little bit harder to get plus the skills and things like that. You're also not going to get your 5 sockets as quickly as you would like because you don't get the 5th socket until you hit level 90, and you don't hit the 4th socket until you hit like level 80 or something like that. I can't remember. So it's a little bit difficult to actually level with because when you start out, you just don't really have a lot of support sockets, and you can't really put anything on it like a perfect jeweler's orb to increase the number of sockets. You just have to level up your character. Another benefit of Spear Throw, which is actually really interesting, is you can potentially have 2 different versions of Spear Throw. I was running 2 different versions for a while, and then I ended up taking it away because I wanted to build more Spearfield. But essentially what you can do is you can have your Spear Throw set up on weapon set 2, and then you could utilize 2 different versions with 2 different support gem setups so that you can get one maybe that generates frenzy charges while the other one is removing them or whatever. And it's actually quite interesting because you can have 2 weapon sets and 2 different weapons. You can easily have 2 different spears, right? So like you could potentially have a fire spear and an ice spear, and you could go back and forth between them, and you could then use things like frost fire, which is where you can consume the freeze to get like extra ignite damage on like the fire one, or you could have like one that breaks armor and one that doesn't break armor, one that's actually pulling the armor for extra damage, armor break for extra damage. There's a lot of ways that you can potentially utilize the 2 spear throws to your advantage. It's just a matter of setting it up properly. Now, I ended up going with the endurance charge way of making frenzy charges, but you can potentially go with a lot of different ways to make frenzy charges. In fact, let's just take a look at some of the ways that you can potentially generate frenzy charges. One is, of course, Combat Frenzy. Combat Frenzy is a spirit gem. I should have grabbed a spirit gem, not a regular gem. Combat Frenzy is one particular way you can do it. Every time you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy, you gain access to a frenzy charge, which can only occur once every 6.3 seconds. It's not exactly the best way in the world, but it does work fairly well for like group killing, right? When you're clearing, it's not very good, effective when you're fighting a boss. Another way is a mark. So there are some marks in the game. One of them is the Sniper's Mark, which gives you a Sniper's Mark ability to gain a charge every single time you critical hit a target, which is also really good. And you can potentially have this happen like all the time, so you can just keep applying it and keep getting frenzy charges as long as you're critting, which could be very fun. In fact, when I was thinking about this build and how I wanted it to function, one of the characters that I probably could have used instead of the Deadeye was I could have used the Oracle for guaranteed crits. I believe I chose the Deadeye specifically, though, because I was utilizing the fire additional projectiles. And this actually does work with the ability, but I think when I was playing with it, I ended up going with a different setup entirely, like with Mirage Deadeye and playing around with that, because it was pretty fun to play around with the Mirages. And then, of course, I'm also using the Thrilling Chase stuff, which is benefits from consuming frenzy charges, has a 50% chance to be doubled, which in this particular case, because I'm getting a rather huge explosion, right? Of what is that, like 600 or 838%? I'm assuming that if it doubles the effect, I'm getting like, what is that, like 1,672 or something, or 76. It's a lot of damage on the explosion if you can double the effect, which is really good. And then you have 50% chance to gain a frenzy charge, additional frenzy charge when you gain one. All of this comes into play because you're obviously building an entire character around frenzy charges. So you need some way to guarantee that you're generating as many frenzy charges as you could possibly get for something like Spear Throw. And of course, if you're utilizing Spear Throw, you can utilize other abilities that can help Spear Throw out. Like, you can obviously use Mirage, which can allow you to fire multiple Spear Throws in a row. You can utilize things like the Spearfield, which can help you generate endurance charges or just simply breaking armor in general. And then you can convert those endurance charges into frenzy charges via this beautiful thing, which is Resonance, which allows you to gain a frenzy charge instead of endurance charges, right? And this is just another way that you can potentially build a character. I could also get endurance charges via Magma Barrier by blocking. I could get endurance charges from a bunch of different sources. It's just it just depends on how you want to build it. I can think of like 100 different ways to build this character, but the Deadeye seemed like a really good choice just simply because of all the frenzy stuff and also the additional projectile, right? And I ended up playing around with a bunch of different builds to try and see if I could get this working. I would love to eventually perfect this build, like maybe go back and try this again with a bunch of different Ascendancies and see if I can decide on which Ascendancy would be the best. I honestly think that a critical hit Ascendancy might be better, like Oracle, just simply because I would have the ability to use Sniper's Mark and just guarantee frenzy charges that way instead. Which I think would be a very interesting way to just stack frenzy charges. Of course, I can stack frenzy charges with other sources as well. In general, it's a fun ability. It's free when you start out. It's a little bit difficult to build because of the lack of actual support gems, but you can put a ton of things in it because it is obviously a physical damage ability. You can put tons of things in it because it's a freezing or cold ability or lightning ability or fire ability or chaos ability. It's really open-ended into what you're trying to achieve from it, right? And because you have two of them, you can literally have two different versions of the ability with two different effects, which is really freaking cool, in my opinion. One way I was thinking about setting it up was with a bunch of gain as extra sources, and then utilizing, say, Embitter on one to convert all those gain as extra sources into a cold version, and then you'd have like a cold explosion version and like a multi-elemental explosion version, which you could like go back and forth on. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think of Spear Throw, whether you think it is interesting to you to make a build around, or whether you just, gloss over it and don't really think about it past the beginning of the game. As always, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you are enjoying the content, and keep watching.